Hello, I'm Gary Mansfield, and welcome to the Mizogart podcast, where each week I'll be speaking to a different artist. Now let's begin by banging these bongos.
Yeah, right. Crazy.
Hello and welcome to episode number 29 of the Mizogart podcast. This week I'm speaking to curator, art dealer and the producer of the Curator Salon podcast, Miss Gita Joshi. Gita and I have been speaking to each other on social media about our podcast over the last few months. We've been speaking about which artists we've got on and who we'd like to have on in the future. And during that conversation we decided it'd be quite a good idea if we were the focus of each other's podcasts. So a few weeks ago, we met up at the Newport Street Gallery during the Martin Elder exhibition. We walked around the exhibition, getting to know each other a little bit better, and then went upstairs to the cafeteria. Because it was relatively quiet, and I don't mind a bit of atmospheric noise on this podcast, we decided it might be best to record the episode of the Curator Salon first. So I ordered a couple of coffees while Gita set up her equipment. We sat down and got underway. We was in a canteen, so there was a little bit of background noise. You can hear the radio and the clanking of cups and saucers. But it was very much bearable. You'll find out yourself when you go and have a listen, if you haven't already. And then when we was finished, Gita went and ordered a couple of coffees while I set up the equipment to record this episode. And as we recorded, a few more people came into the canteen, which was expected for a Saturday afternoon. But then a little while in walks a family of 5. And where did they decide to sit? Yes, on the table right next to us. I was hoping they would have noticed all the recording equipment and microphones on the table. There was that many, it was as if Gita was doing an interview at the UN. And if you've ever been there yourself, you'll know that there's some Damien Hirst artworks in a cafeteria. You can hear the young lad asking his dad about the one next to him and dad telling him all about it. But for the next few minutes it was getting louder and louder. The ridiculousness of the situation did get the better of Gita and I. So come and join me in the Newport Street Gallery with curator, art dealer and the Curator Salon podcast host, Gita Joshi. This afternoon I'm sitting in the Newport Street Gallery cafe with Gita Joshi. Hello Gita.
Hello Gary.
How are you?
I'm very well.
We've just recorded a podcast with Gita Joshi for her podcast, which is called the Curator Salon. I'll go straight into my first question, Gita, of 7. How would you explain Gita Joshi to someone that didn't know you?
I wish I could answer it in like just 2 words or something, but it's a bit more complicated than that.
And so it should be.
I am a curator, I'm an art dealer, I am a podcaster. So, I mean, but all of these things kind of feel like job titles as well. I think in what I've noticed recently over, a lot of the work I've been doing, it's actually around promoting artists. And I think, though I didn't start the podcast to actually just do that, it was actually to bring the conversations I was having with artists more into the public domain and invite more people into them. I've actually realised that, it is a bit of its own platform as well. And I think one of the connections through my work over the last several years as curator, art dealer, charity trustee and all these things is actually, somebody that promotes artists. Yeah. And I think that's the sort of connecting thread through a lot of that. So I don't know what that is if you're going to turn it into a job title.
But you've got sort of many hats and I suppose we all put on a different hat depending on where we are that day and what we're about to do.
Yeah, and I think a lot of my work at the moment is around helping artists actually build their own businesses by promoting themselves. But then I also work with them in a sort of a joint capacity, like I get into their business with them to actually help them do some of the execution on that as well. So rather than just saying, you need to sort of change up whatever, how they're sort of bringing people in through their Instagram or their emailing or whatever it is, that's oftentimes what they're stuck on. So that is what I'm actually helping them with within that business. So it's actually helping them kind of, like I said, sort of build more sustainable art businesses. But again, it is about helping them to sort of promote themselves, because you can't always rely on other people to do that. So.
No. And your podcast, you bring in different, I don't know if you'd call them experts, but people who have got a lot of knowledge in a specific field.
With you mean in terms of like business context and things like that? Yeah, that's right. Because, like I said, because that's the sort of work I'm doing. It's an audience. I have a Facebook group and things like that, which is where we do a lot of teaching and things. But I just think it's really interesting to have those sort of conversations with other experts that have very niche experience, but then tailor that towards the art world, because, art, when you're selling art, essentially it is a luxury item. You are going to appeal to a small percentage of people that can afford it usually, and then obviously within the aesthetic as well, that, there's even fewer people, right, compared to somebody that is selling, I don't know, software or socks or something like that. So it's quite niche.
Everyone uses the same sort of tools, whether they're selling original fine arts, whether they're selling prints, or whether they're selling arts and crafts. It's all...
Yeah, but I think a lot of that comes through storytelling and how you communicate that. I think one of the advantages artists have is that they usually have very interesting stories, and they kind of play it down oftentimes on the artist statement, or they think the artist statement is in itself their story, but it rarely is, which is one of the things that we often bring out in the podcast and the conversations I have with the ones I work with and stuff.
See, myself, I was quite conscious for quite a while about mentioning prison. I didn't want to be a stereotypical prison artist, but then I found out there isn't a stereotypical prison artist out there. I was quite... not unique. I mean, there's plenty of artists who have sort of stepped inside a prison cell, as it were. But yeah, as I say, I tried to pull away from mine and found out that it was probably my main tool rather than something to push away,
But it's also for you part of, like you had a very transformational moment. Like when you were in prison, right, around sort of taking up art classes and then sort of being exposed to conceptual art and things like that. And actually you made very conscious choices, like actually that was the life you wanted. And I think those are, those sort of pivotal points that people have within their own stories. If it's not prison, then it might be like becoming a mother or the loss of a loved one or something that you didn't think was actually related to your creative practice or your creative journey, was actually the trigger after all.
How did you come into art? Was art always around you when you were growing up?
Not necessarily as a young kid, but it was, I think I did art history at A-level, and I think that was the first time I really was taking a subject that really resonated with me, something I just sort of very intuitively understood, something I was never sated with. I was constantly wanting to see more and learn more and read more and all of that, and that was art history, so of course we were looking at a lot of 19th century things and very old things rather than contemporary art. But I think for me that was probably the point where I realised that was my path somewhere, and quite how that would be fulfilled I didn't know. I did an art history degree, but and then I worked for a Royal Commission in London, which was my first job, and actually a lot of that, and then working at an architect's practice, looking back, a lot of that was around exhibiting, but it wasn't what I recognised at the time. But it wasn't until I I worked in finance for many years, and even during that time I was doing part-time courses and sort of keeping one hand in the art world, but just as a consumer, I would go to the big exhibitions and I would do classes and go to talks and things like that. I was volunteering at things like London Open House and so on. So still a lot of what I was doing was around art history rather than contemporary art, and certainly nothing in terms of contributing to that space. But it wasn't really until I did curating, some curatorial training at Central St Martin's, that I actually realised, well, all this sort of time in the business world and my business experience combined with the curating was actually the thing I should be doing, and there was a way of actually probably making a living out of it as well, because I think for many years I thought that to work in the art world meant that you had to work in a museum, and we knew that all those jobs were taken up by a handful of people that all came out of the same universities, and that was very, very closed, even on the shitty, minimum wages. So that was it really. It was that sort of bringing together the curating and the business experience that made me think, there was a way forward that I could create my own path.
So you pretty much sort of found your own avenue, as it were. You studied art history, and obviously art history is extremely broad. What was the type of art that you would go and see that you liked yourself?
For me, it was a lot of pre-Raphaelite stuff. A lot of that at the Tate Britain, but also the Victorian collections around the regional museums as well. I think that was a massive influence, and then places like Kettle's Yard as well, and the artists like Ben Nicholson and those sort of people that sort of showed both there and in other places. But I think those were the most sort of influential pieces in terms of art history for me.
Is there a specific artwork that you would call your favourite, for instance?
It's a hard one. I can't think of a single one, but I can think of, again, Kettle's Yard, as a space, as an environment, I think is incredible. I love that place. I think I sort of, don't sort of identify it as a single artwork, but it is more the whole experience of that place.
It's an extremely hard one to pin down, isn't it? But inspiration, where do you go for inspiration? Or if not inspiration, where do you go to relax?
The coast. I like going out, looking out to sea. But I think artist studios, actually, if we're going to have the deeper conversations, the bigger conversations, I find that both relaxing and energising in equal measure.
The Camberwell Open, did you start the Camberwell Open?
I did,
You found it?
I did, It was, it's an open exhibition that took place alongside the Camberwell Arts Festival, because I was working with them as a board member, and I wanted to, as a curator, actually have my own project rather than only supporting the festival's own activities. So I had this idea of an open exhibition, and the idea of it was to present a snapshot of creative practice from across SE5 or artists associated with Camberwell. And so it ran for 2 festivals, and then last year, the year before, I ended up picking up the Open Studios programme, so I didn't have the capacity to run the open exhibition as well. And then last year I kind of pulled away from the whole festival thing because I was sort of focusing on other projects, and I thought, well, the open could still happen, and I might sort of run it in the autumn. One thing and another, various things got in the way, and it didn't happen. So it is on my radar to sort of bring around again, because I think it was actually quite an important exhibition in some ways, because a lot of artists, or Camberwell, is very creative. Obviously, we've got the art school, we've got the South London Gallery is there. There's hundreds of artists sort of living and working in that environment, but not all of them have studios that they can show from open studios. So when we actually had the open exhibition, it meant loads more people kind of were able to come out and actually show their work, and it also gave artists that were perhaps exhibiting for the first time that little bit of extra encouragement to do that and put their work in the public domain. They were able to see their work alongside more established artists. So it actually achieved sort of many things, But I think if I run it again, I'll probably do it in some kind of a different space. The space we used for the last couple of shows we can't use anyway, because they're under new management and they've reconfigured that space. But I'm sort of thinking about ways of doing it.
Did you learn much from it, from doing an open like that?
It's quite interesting because, like, for me, there are curatorial projects that sometimes when I conceive them, I know the whole thing.
Yeah, because you've got a lot of control over a single show.
Yeah.
But when it's an open like that, you do have to loosen the reins a little bit, I would imagine.
Well, we had some parameters in place, like the artwork couldn't be over certain dimensions.
Yeah.
A single artist couldn't submit more than, I don't know how many it was, like maybe they couldn't submit more than 3 pieces. So there were criteria, and everything had to be 2D, it had to be wall hanging, it had to be it had to be able to hang on a picture hook and stuff like that, so it had to be wired and things like that. So that we had all these instructions in place. But then I think there was one caveat, so that if it was, in my opinion, offensive, then I had the right to reject it. But other than that, everything was...
That's a hard one to judge as well, isn't it? Offensive. What would be deemed as offensive? Would it be nudity or...
Not necessarily nudity, but it could be if it was sort of in a graphic or sort of violent nature, I guess, because we were showing in a very public place. It was the foyer of a leisure centre.
Oh, wow, okay.
And of course there were lots of children coming through there, and so we just had to be mindful of that audience. So I think that's where it was. I guess swear words wouldn't have been appropriate.
And that run for, did you say it run for 2 seasons?
It did, yeah.
Did it grow between the first and or was there any difference between the first and the second? Did you do things any differently? Because I know that where I've put these face value shows on, I know that I learnt, bearing in mind I had no experience beforehand, I learnt a hell of a lot from the first going into the second.
I think, like I was saying, it's like, for me sometimes when I conceive shows, I really know the whole thing inside out before it's even done, and that is like some kind of that's just my, I don't know, gift? I don't know what you'd call it. Right, in the same way some artists just know how to use their material, or, they know how they can manipulate certain materials, or, what they're trying to communicate. So I didn't actually have, I was already coming at it with quite a degree of gallery experience as well, because at that time, when I had one of those shows, I had 3 shows on in London at the same time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so this was a kind of a milestone in my own personal career, right? So I had that show, I had one in the City of London, and I had one in central London as well. So it was, I wouldn't say I didn't learn, I'm sure I did.
You could leave some space for the rest of us to show some work.
Well, I haven't done anything in 6 months, so... so I'm sure I did, but I think a lot of that particular show was around process, and that's what we're always kind of fine-tuning.
I mean, as a gallerist, how did you become a gallerist?
I was invited to show at an art fair, and I thought, okay, well, that sounds interesting, let me do that. So I did, and I was kind of doing it because, I really liked the artists I was showing, but it was also like, oh my gosh, I need to get some artists together to show at this fair, and I need to sort out, oh my gosh, business side of things and a contract and all the things. So I was kind of moving into the art world, but not quite sure what I was doing. And being invited to sell at this fair was really a kick in the pants to get things into place, within a certain time frame.
Make a few decisions,
Right. So that happened, but what actually happened was when I was actually at that fair, that's, I think, a real pivotal point for me, where I actually realised how much I loved talking to people about the artwork, getting them excited about the artwork. And seeing their response and all that sort of thing, and how I was able to sort of talk about it so easily. I was kind of in my comfort zone in many ways. I wasn't feeling scared about it or intimidated about it or anything. It's just like, no, this is me, this is what I represent, these are the artists who I'm backing, and this is why you should be interested in. Hey, look at the fine detail here and there. So I was kind of having those really kind of excited conversations, and that's when I came back. So that fair was in Manchester, and I came back and thought, oh my God, that was just amazing. I loved it. I can do that all the time, and I think I need to go and find a space. So I basically put the feelers out to find a full-time gallery space.
Well,
but at
that's
the
a
time,
big move.
It was.
It's a big move from showing in an art fair. What was the time frame between finishing the art fair and deciding to find a permanent space? Or even a physical space?
The decision was, it was done. You know, that was it. I needed to. I put out the feelers about a week later.
Nice.
So I think that fair was in the end of September or early October, and put out the feelers for, you know, my contacts to reach out to their contacts to do the thing. And basically I moved into the premises in the last week of November.
And whereabouts was that?
It was in Waterloo, so yeah, central London.
Wow.
So yeah, Lower Marsh.
And was that a big learning curve, or did it just sort of fall into place?
I mean, basically I was taking on an ex-cafe, you know, it was a bit of a ramshackle space. It was a pop-up lease, so, you know, as much as I'm saying, you know, I was taking on a full-time gallery space, which is absolutely true, I was actually taking on a very short-term lease. It was 6 months, and that whole pop-up scene was, you know, pretty normal back then. I mean, it still is, but in a slightly more sanitized way now, right? Because now, you know, building developers are creating units that are for what they're calling pop-up, but they are already nice and clean and all that sort of thing. And back then it was just like you were basically taking on an empty shop that had been empty for 2 years, and figuring out, like, you know, how to make it a usable space for the thing that you want to do. So that is
with a 6 months contract, it could take you a month to get the
could for sure
get the walls clean enough to put hanging artwork on.
Yeah, and so that's kind of what, you know, that first couple of weeks was, you know, and I was really lucky to be working with a friend who was also a really good builder and carpenter and all that sort of thing, and we managed to kind of turn it around and put up new walls and conceal other bits that we didn't want to have on display, like cooker hoods. You know?
And what did you call that gallery?
It was called Ursa Major.
And where did that name come from?
I don't know, but it was just one day I had this sort of inspired idea, and I don't know, and it just sounded good, so I thought...
That's perfect, as good as
any.
And
I really didn't want to have a gallery that had my name, like Gita Joshi Gallery. Like, everybody does that. I don't know why they do it. I don't think it sounds great. And, you know, there was the Curious Duke Gallery, as you know, in East London. I mean, her name is Eleni Duke, but, you know, I thought Curious Duke was a really cool name. And then last year I met James at Fruta Gallery, and Fruta is a gallery both in Rome and in Glasgow. And he decided to call his gallery Fruta Gallery. And he was the same. It's like, oh, I hate those know, galleries that are just named after a person. And that's just been a tradition. And there's, you know, I mean, now we obviously have got Jealous and Art Republic and those that have also been around for a while. But I just didn't want to be, have it that tightly named after me.
It's like, you see, just going off of it a little bit, when I'd done a podcast with Dave Buonaguidi a little while ago, he's into advertising, and he was saying that all advertising firms are just named after the three or four guys on the board, and it's a combination of their surnames, just like solicitors. So it's funny how people, I don't know if it's an ego thing or it's just a traditional thing that people name themselves, they name their business after themselves. I wouldn't think it's an ego thing, but you never know.
I guess, or maybe it's just easier. I don't know.
I mean, I called this podcast a Mizogart podcast.
Yeah, why is that?
A lot of people ask that. It's an old word. I thought it was an old Cockney word, but it turns out it was used a lot. My granddad, when I was whining as a little kid, he used to call me a Mizog. And since the internet, I've looked up to say, and I use Mizog myself when my kids are whining, stop being a Mizog. And I looked it up on the internet, and it says that it's a shortened version of a miserable old git, Ms. OG.
Oh.
Whether that's true or not, but that's that's where I come from. Now I'm known as a Mizog, which is brilliant. Miserable old git. If you was putting on an exhibition with 5 artists that you could choose, any 5 artists or artworks,
Living or dead? Or...
Either way.
Oh, it's a big question, actually, because I've been thinking about which shows are ready for revival, to be honest. And one of the things on my mind was there's the John Moores exhibition up in Liverpool, which is, it's brilliant. And I think one of the really influential exhibitions, when I think back to my sort of student days, was up there. And I think then actually Tate, it might have been the Tate in London rather than the Tate in Liverpool, had shows, what I think they were calling it the New British Art, or the New Figurative Art, or something like that. And I was thinking, it would be great to kind of really pull out those works again and actually have that show again.
Yeah.
Or, that in relation to the contemporary New Figurative. So I think for me, artists like, those ones that were really important to me back then still resonate, like Lisa Milroy and Stephen Conroy.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. So I think certainly they would have to feature. But quite who else I would put in there? That's the thing, it wouldn't necessarily be a very cohesive show.
That doesn't matter, does it?
Okay.
Well,
you could have a room each, right?
Yeah.
And then you could sort of walking through the experience. I think some of the Gordon Chung's recent work as well, yeah. I was fortunate enough to have a studio visit there. It wasn't last year, it was the year before, yeah. So it's a great space if he's still there. Also, this question makes me kind of run through all my sort of, visual experience, right, of what have I ever seen in my life that made me stop and pay attention. So I would have something like, probably I would have somebody like Alexandra Dillon, who is an artist who actually paints on very sort of hardware items and things like that. I mean, she produces really quite beautiful work. So I think somebody like her, and then I don't know. I think I'd really like to put on a show with the stone sculptors that I've had both on the podcast, and then there's a couple of others that I've got scheduled as well. They make very sort of figurative stone sculptures. You might have seen Barbara Segal does the handbags, and then Sebastian with the denim and the towels.
Sorry to interrupt, but them handbags are stunning.
They are exquisite, yeah. And then we've got Alistair Thompson hopefully coming on the podcast, and he's a Scottish artist because Sebastian and Barbara are US based, but Al's work I came across several years ago, and he does this incredible sort of, I don't think he's doing quite so much of it now, but it was clothes, like it'll be like a lady's dress or something, as if it's hanging on a hanger.
Yeah, I know. I didn't know his name, but I know the work.
Yeah, so his stuff I would love to, really kind of get into a show and put that into conversation with other things, whether it's around trompe l'oeil, whether it's around contemporary figurative, or I would probably want to place it in that context rather than just being a show about stone. But, one way or another, I think those sculptors have got something really interesting to say. Stephen Shaheen is another one, actually, as well, based in the US, but he's doing this really interesting work with producing like bone forms, like ribs and fibula and tibia and all of that, but from both sort of animals and people, out of marble, which is really interesting because marble is actually the compressed bones and crustacean and all of that, right from the earth, but then sort of bringing it back into like those sculptural forms. So his work would be quite interesting as well, and that's kind of quite an interesting because it makes it a really interesting discourse around.
Excellent. If you weren't
the music's going to cut out. And someone's going to say, "Oh, your record's skipping in the back."
If you weren't in the arts, what would you like to be?
I can't really imagine not being in the arts one way or another, because I think a large part of me is actually, I've forged my own path with it. I've created that. So whether it's, originally, like I've done it through volunteering when, I'd like volunteer for open house and things like that. Whether it's through being a student, whether it's being a collector. and then kind of doing things like obviously putting on exhibitions and then promoting artists and having the podcast. So I think if I wasn't in the arts, I would find a way to do that, which I think in many ways I already have.
Nice. The gallery, where's the gallery at the moment?
The gallery is online at the moment, so in the last couple of years since leaving the space at Waterloo, we've had some pop-ups. We haven't got any others scheduled for the moment, so you can go online to see it there, but we're probably sort of changing things up with that in the coming year.
Yeah, good. And the Curator Salon, where are you with that at the moment?
So the Curator Salon it's an online platform, it's a lot of the blog posts that go with the podcast that I do. It is conversations with artists and things like that. Through that platform I also have there's an educational side, though a lot of that happens in the Facebook group. And then that's, where you can find out more ways of working with me, whether it's as an artist that you want support in your business, or if it's for people that run spaces and environments, that they want help with curatorial support, or a curator to sort of bring in and put on exhibitions for different ways of using that space. And then in the past, I've also kind of actually independently, but I'm going to sort of bring it all under the Curator Salon now, is I've run gallery suppers as well.
Oh, nice.
So that was really good, and I realised that actually last year basically a family member was dying, so a lot of that time I was not around to really kind of spend as much time in my art business, and obviously things have changed for this year. So I'm thinking probably we'll go back to having the gallery suppers again. It was very much a summer thing, and that was kind of bringing together artists and people in the art world. But I think we'll sort of cast the net wider this time as well and make them bigger. And then we did things like studio visits as well. And that might be another thing that we sort of think about this time, if there are people interested, because one of the things that's been happening with my doing the podcast is it's really made me feel like I needed to grow a platform to promote those artists. And so in doing that, that's working really well for me. I'm using Instagram as my main sort of way of reaching people and talking to people or promoting the podcast or whatever it is. But I think it would be nice to have some real world interaction. Yeah. And I think bringing the gallery suppers back, maybe doing occasional studio tours, or it might even be like, saying like, okay, well, me and Gary are going to go and see this exhibition if you'd like to come. Yeah. Then, we'll see you at this exhibition at this time in the foyer or something, Yeah, and good. That might be a nice sort of thing to do as well, and to meet people that are interested in what we're doing.
And at the moment, on your podcast, on the Curator Salon, as we speak, you have a podcast talking about the Venice Biennale.
So yeah, that's right. So one of the things I did last year, when I pulled away from doing the work with the Visual Arts Charity, was actually spend more time learning and going back into sort of training around my own curatorial practice, because one of the things I knew was that particular Visual Arts Festival was working on a hyper-local level, and I knew that I wanted to kind of do more things, I wanted to do bigger things, and that could even be international, and I didn't feel that I was exploring that enough. So I spent some time training in Rome at the British School. I was in Venice for the Biennale as well, and did some training around that. So that episode actually came out of that, because that was a really interesting time. But more than that, it wasn't, while as much as it was about my learning around, developing my curatorial practice or how to participate in larger platforms, it was also around actually encouraging other artists that they can take part in places like the Venice Biennale as well, and that opportunity is available to them, because I really think with things like Venice that the only artists that seem to get exposure in the press in the UK would be the ones that are representing the National Pavilion, and that's not a true representation of it. That might be media worthy, that might be because you've got the British Council putting funding behind some press coverage or whatever it is, but there are still ways for artists to show independently or as collectives, which I think the idea of collectives is really interesting as well.
Well, I'm going there for the first time this year.
Are you? When are you going to be there?
Yeah, I don't know yet. My friend Lee Ainsworth, he's taken me for my 50th
Oh,
So I was
fantastic.
50 last year, so he's going to take me this year.
Oh, that'd be so good. Yeah, I'm going to be there for the opening weekend, so if you're there, then...
It won't be then.
It won't be
No,
then.
I very
Oh,
much doubt
damn.
it. The Curator Salon, where can people listen to it? Where can they find it?
The Curator Salon Art Podcast you can find on any place that you get your podcast, which is Spotify, iTunes, Google Play and so on. You can also find the website at thecuratorsalon.com, where all the episodes are published along with the corresponding blog prints and then illustrated with images too.
And Instagram?
Instagram is the best place to find me, yes. It's at the Gita Joshi.
At the Gita Joshi. Well, that's the end of my questions and the end of this podcast. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary. It's been loads of fun.
Well, there you have it, Miss Gita Joshi. There was a little bit more atmospheric noise than we were both expecting, but that did push me to go and order a couple of microphones that are specifically designed to cut out background noise for if ever I'm in that sort of situation again. But it was quite funny when the people sitting next to us got the better of Gita and I, and laughter took over. We did speak afterwards about doing something together in the future, maybe an art tour or an exhibition or something down those lines. But that's all got to be finalised. But whatever we decide, I know one thing, I'm very much looking forward to it. But until then, if you haven't done already, go over to Gita's Curator's Salon podcast. There's a great one on the Venice Biennale. There's one on Jeremy Wolfe, who's artist in residence at the Empire State Building. But my favourite was possibly Patricia Volk. That was back in September. But go over to the Curator's Salon podcast yourself. She's got dozens to choose from. And speaking of podcast collaborations, I was down at Jealous Gallery a couple of weeks ago and I bumped into Rowan Newton, 1/3 of the Artproof podcast. He was preparing some prints for his up-and-coming solo show at Jealous. And disturbing him for 5 minutes, we were speaking all things podcast. During that conversation, Rowan mentioned how it could be a good idea if the Artproof podcast, Gita Joshi's Curator Salon and the Mizogart podcast all got together and done an end-of-year summary. I think that'd be something quite special, because all the podcasts are very different. And a couple of weeks ago, I got invited onto one of the biggest podcasts out there, which is called Hardcore Listings. It's presented by Chris and Stu, and it's part of Scroobius Pip's Distraction Pieces network. I got invited on there to tell my story, how I got into art. As well as telling my story, the podcast concluded with me talking about the Face Value Free exhibition in aid of Katie Piper Foundation that is happening on the 18th of April down at Jealous Gallery. I did intend only to have 30 artists for this exhibition, but I'm already up to 46. We've got such artists as Jessica Albarn, Charming Baker, Riker, the Connor Brothers, Patrick Hughes, Gary Hume, Pure Evil, Rankin. We've got Richard Woods, Nettie Wakefield, and Mr. Rolling Stones himself, Mr. Ronnie Wood. But I'm doing a full episode on that on April the 15th, along with Katie Piper herself. At the end of this podcast, like I say every week, there should be a reviews and comments section somewhere within the platform that you listen to it. If you could just spend a couple of moments just to leave a comment, that would really help me and anybody else looking for an arts podcast. If you want to ask me any questions or see what's going on, you can go to any of the social medias, which is at Mizogart, Mizogart. Or to see a full lineup of future artists, you can go to www.mizogart.com. So that's all from me. Thanks for listening, and until next week, ta-da.